my not so triumphant return to vlogging. I always feel really awkward starting these. I'm still getting used to figuring out what I want my intros to look like, but I'm just gonna go for it because you only get better at things if you keep doing them. Because what I'm planning on doing in the next week or so, I'm not gonna put a specific time frame on this, is reading my unhinged women books. And the first one that I plan on reading for this vlog is Woman Eating, which is about a woman who is a vampire. I know this has been kind of explained to me as much more of a literary vampire story as opposed to horror. It's going to be a lot more like your sad girl book, which is the point of this vlog, and I just have been reading a lot of sad girl or unhinged women books this year, and since a lot of these books came through at the same time for me from the library, I figured why not lean into it a little bit more. The other book I'm hoping to read this week is A Certain Hunger, another unhinged book. They actually look very similar. These covers complement each other, I think, which is really funny because this is like a literary fiction about a young woman vampire who has to learn how to live on her own, and it's going to be a lot. I've already read a little bit of it, and it's definitely more of a coming of age story than specifically a vampire story, and I'm interested to see where this goes. And this, which I'm assuming these are like famous paintings, this one is about a woman who is in prison, and she's a foodie, but she's in prison because one of the foods that she likes to eat is other people, and it's from her perspective. So, and in this one too, the vampire is trying to not eat people, whereas this is a person who, to the best of my knowledge, is just a normal human, well, is a not supernatural being who eats people. So that'll be an interesting contrast. I also plan on rereading Bunny. I read this, I believe, in 2020, and it blew me away. It was by far my favorite book of 2020, which was when I started to get back into reading. I initially had got this from the library and then went and purchased it, so I'm hoping to reread it, maybe have a different perspective on it now, or even better, like I just plan on tabbing it and kind of processing my thoughts out loud this time instead of kind of sitting alone and being like, what? If you know anything about this book, it's definitely up there with the Unhinged Women weird, surreal fabulism kind of genre, and you're following a young woman who is in graduate school for her MFA, and she's in a writing program in a small college called Warren, and she is both drawn and repulsed by this clique in her cohort who call themselves the Bunnies, and eventually gets wrapped up in their social circle, and that makes this sound a lot less weird than it is. It's kind of hard to talk about it without being deep in the plot, so we'll get to that later. I'm gonna go make some tea and pretend that it's fall, even though early September means that it still gets hot in the middle of the day, and just keep reading Woman Eating. So I meant to check in more often today, or at least earlier today, but I'm about to go to bed, and I'll probably finish Woman Eating tonight. I just hit part 3. I think having a general idea of what to expect for a book can put you in the right mindset or prepare you to pick that book up when you're in the right mindset for it, and that's absolutely what happened in this case. I've seen this often called no plot, just vibes, and it's very rare that a book that I've read at least is actually zero plot, but the plot is thin. It's been an interesting metaphorical look at things like coming of age and dealing with family, complex family, and as someone who has a complicated relationship with her family, but who doesn't, a lot of that part is resonating with me. I am really enjoying the language. I think that this take on the vampire story. Vampire stories are always metaphors, or at least they're almost always metaphors, and a lot of times it can feel really uh, overdone or boring, or really really cheesy. And if you're looking at it more of like the Twilight actiony romance side of things, and this is kind of a fresh take for me. I think it's an interesting look at what does it mean to be coming of age at a time that's so different from the parent that raised you when they came of age. What is it like to have all of these things projected onto you by the person who raised you, by a parent, when you're coming to realize as a fully fledged adult, and you're really basically being an adult to your adult and fully separating yourself from your family dynamic or from your family of origin. What does that actually feel like, and how do you come to the realization that those projections your family member or your parent or whoever placed on you aren't true or aren't fully true? And what does that feel like? And that's being done in a metaphorical sense. There's also a lot of concepts with food, because she can't eat regular food. The character has been supplied pig's blood by her mother her entire life. Her mother created her, her mother gave birth to her, which is an interesting thing as a vampire giving birth, but, and then turned her when she was only a few days old. And so she's never eaten food. She's always eaten pig's blood that her mother's provided for her. Now her mother is ailing and unable to do that, and she's trying to navigate all sorts of levels of adulthood for the first time. But because this main character is also half Japanese and a quarter Malaysian, food being such a cornerstone of culture and experiencing our culture and our ethnicity is being used really elegantly so far. I'm really enjoying this, and I will get back to you hopefully tomorrow once I'm finished and maybe being a little more coherent, but don't count on it. I wanted to do a quick check-in. I finished Woman Eating last night, and I think that this is probably going to be between 3 and 4 stars. I'm going to have to think on it. I really appreciated the way the vampire metaphor is used throughout this book. I do feel like the pacing is off, which is a weird thing to say about a book that is definitely no plot, just vibes. But there is still a pacing problem with it. I do feel this would have either benefited from being more fleshed out and being longer, or being an actual novella as opposed to a short novel. I believe it's 256 pages long. Yeah. So it definitely suffered from pacing stuff, but I really loved the language and the number of just the metaphors that are used. The way the vampire metaphor is used in this was refreshing. So I did really enjoy it, but I think that it needs a little bit of polish, or it could have been better as a shorter novel or a longer novel. Yes, hello. I hear you. I'm coming to work from home, so my work phone is going off. So I have moved on to reading A Certain Hunger, which despite the cover definitely seems like it might be a little more plot heavy. And that first chapter alone, we're already finding out why this main character is in prison and how she got caught. And so far, the writing is so extremely pretentious and flowery, but I think that's intentional because the main character is a foodie. I think she's a food critic, and it seems like it might be a commentary on the way that we look at food as art versus food as sustenance. But we'll see. I'm only a chapter in. It was a really interesting thing to read while I was eating my breakfast this morning, but that's what I get for reading a book about a cannibal. It's been a couple days since I was able to do any real substantial reading. I've only read one more chapter of Women Eating, A Certain Hunger. So I don't have a ton of updates, but I at least wanted to check in this morning. Oh, hello. Hi, sweetie. Astor likes to join my videos lately. But what I'm planning on doing today is either listening to Bunny on audiobook, because I'm going to be in the car for a bit, or once I get home and settled in for the evening, which might not actually happen this evening, so who knows, continuing on with woman eating. A Certain Hunger! Why, past me, could you not remember the title of the book? I am really enjoying the reading that I'm doing. I've just been so swamped at work, and when I get home, a lot of what I want to do is kind of stare at the ceiling and do very little, but surprise, surprise, reading actually is better care for me. So we'll see how the rest of this day goes. It is the weekend, and that doesn't always mean I have a ton of time to read because I've been more and more social lately. We'll see how it goes. And oh, okay, I have a kitty that's needing attention, so I should probably check out. All right, thanks. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I didn't get any reading done today. Oh, that's not true. So I did start listening to the audiobook of Bunny, and I don't know how well that's gonna go. Thankfully, there's a character in Bunny who has a light Scottish lilt, and the narrator is amazing, except her attempt at a Scottish accent. I don't know what's going on with that. I can't tell you what kind of accent it is, but it's really bad. So I'll probably read that one in my paper copy, and I want to tab it anyway, but I just wanted to keep reading something, and I couldn't find A Certain Hunger through my library. And I am enjoying it, but just because of all the stuff that's been going on, I am having a hard time concentrating and finding myself more invested in things right now when I'm listening to them, which is not my usual style. So I did find the audiobook and got a free trial to listen to it of A Certain Hunger. So that's my plan for the rest of the night. Hopefully I can get some more reading done tomorrow. But right now I'm just going to listen to a story about a foodie who eats people, and here comes and cuddle with my cats. I don't know what's going on with my camera quality, but that's fine. I finished A Certain Hunger last night. I am so glad I decided to get the audiobook. I kind of did a mixed reading where I read a few chapters, and then I would listen to a few chapters. A few times I read along with the audiobook, which is always interesting because I know I'm a fast reader, but I don't think I'm that fast because I don't like to listen to audiobooks super fast compared to some people. But when I read along with the audiobook, I'm like, this is so slow, even when I've upped the speed. Just an interesting experience I've had. And I'm really glad I listened to the audiobook because it was definitely satirical in its sense with, like, the language was intentionally pretentious, which is a tongue twister. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned that when I did my first check-in on this book. And it is kind of a chilling book. It's supposed to be a satire, although I'm struggling to understand, like, a satire when we're talking about, like, unhinged women books is just a willingness to write. People are saying something is satire because you have a willingness to write from, like, a psychopathic woman's point of view in a psychopathic voice. I'm using the term that the character uses in the book. Or if it's actually supposed to be fully satirical. So Bunny is satire, and I am going to continue to read that for the rest of this vlog, and I love it, and I get the satire, and this is also satire, and I understand what it's trying to say with regards to how feminism can be weaponized, and people can justify bad behavior, which is something that also came up in Lapvona. But a vast majority of this is we're just in this person's head, and she's so, I don't want to say evil. I hate calling people evil. but she's so detached from the rest of humanity and from feeling emotions that the common human experience. It doesn't feel like satire, it just feels like an exploration of what someone who has that particular personality disorder or mental health struggle, whatever you want to call it, what they're actually experiencing and what does that look like? How can that be taken to an extreme? I struggle with this because I struggle with rating this because I'm trying to figure out if it's truly satire. It's definitely horror. It was written really well. I found the overwriting intentional. It did make it difficult to read sometimes, but it absolutely informed you about what the character was feeling and trying to convince the reader of. Although not in like a Lolita by Nabokov way where he's Humbert Humbert is a unreliable narrator and trying to convince people of his goodness. There's no attempting at like saying that Dorothy doesn't try to say that she's good like at any point in this book. She's very upfront about how she knows she's evil, and how detached she is and that she doesn't care that she's detached. So it's not really an unreliable narrator thing so much as it's just an exploration of that specific character trait. I'm getting rambly. I should probably write down my thoughts on this eventually. But I am struggling because it was written intentionally this way, but it made it very difficult to read, and I don't know if it fully made its point. But I did enjoy it, so it's probably going to be in the 4-star range. So my plans for the rest of tonight and whenever I check in with you is to finish reading Bunny. I'm going to tab things and hopefully have more coherent thoughts than I did the first time I read it, and more coherent thoughts than I've had about these other books. I do also want to check in because part of the reason I didn't get further in Bunny or get further in this vlog yesterday, which was a weekend day, was because I got to go to a bookstore. I put in some of the imagery, B-roll, whatever you call it, with a friend who I don't get to see as much as I'd like anymore. And I bought some books, even though I'm trying to read the books, 13 books I have out from the library, and I have 14 books on hold, but it's okay. The first book that I got is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornischek. This is a Norse myth retelling following a woman who has refused to provide Odin with knowledge of the future. It's been a long time since I read any Norse mythology, but I actually initially requested this from NetGalley when it was available on there, but it got refused, and that's totally fine. But I found a signed copy at this local bookstore, and it seems like a really good book for me to read this winter. And God, the cover. I need to not do cover buys, but this is such a good cover. I also picked up A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Do I even need to introduce this book? If you're watching book videos, you probably know a lot about this. If you don't, this is a kind of an famous book that has been called trauma bait or worse things, and the most beautiful book you'll ever read and won't want to read again, or maybe you will. I know a couple people have reread it recently. I have big plans for a video for this, but I also want to read it. It doesn't look like super chunky, but it is. These are nice thin pages. This is over 800 pages long. So we'll see another like cozy up, maybe when I take some days off, really dedicate myself to this so I have space to cry as well. This is definitely like a booktube classic almost, but also the subject matter and the the project I want to do with this, I couldn't pass it up. I've been thinking about it for over a year, so I finally decided to do it. I should not be buying books. I have so many books I need to read, but I have wanted to read this since Allison Pages mentioned it, and I think that she's actually doing a book club reading of it. I think that's what this is. It's already torn a little because I started opening this and realized that I had my address on display, so oops. But what I got was, I'm not good at opening packages, is, ooh, okay, Lonely Castle. Sorry, I should tell you what it is. Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Sujimura. I've been really loving translated Japanese works, and I wanted to read this for a while, and I couldn't find it, and I think it hadn't been published in the US yet, because I had to get this from Blackwell's. The reason I went, ooh, is the cover has a nice fold out. Look at that, which I was not expecting. And then the back is really beautiful too. Hopefully I can read this month, that's the plan, but little mini book haul, because I totally need more books to read. The rest of tonight, I'm going to settle in, start reading Bunny physically, so I can tab it and not listen to terrible Scottish accents, and drink some tea. So I've gotten about halfway through Bunny, and I am tabbing, but two things. I ran out of tabs, and I am picky about the colors that I use because they do determine different things. So that kind of put a stalling in my reading, and I am about to go on a trip to see Riot Fest. And because of that, and that I want to get something up sooner rather than later, I am going to end the vlog, the reading vlog, here. Bunny is still absolutely a masterpiece to me. I love the writing. I'm so glad that I'm rereading it. Of the 3 books that I've read, it's definitely my favorite. And regarding this like unhinged women trend, or whatever you want to call it, what I've learned reading this many quote unquote unhinged women books in a row, or at least over this short period of time, is 1, of course there's going to be an uneven quality, and 2, I think that there is such a risk of these being overwritten. I know some people think that Bunny is overwritten. I disagree. And I know that in A Certain Hunger, the overwriting is on purpose. Reading this many books like this back to back to back, even though they all have very different storylines, one is about a vampire, one is about a non-supernatural woman who is a cannibal, and then Bunny is its own type of fabulous, surreal story that is metaphor, but it might also actually be happening. I know that's an ongoing debate about the plot of Bunny. I do plan on doing a dedicated review of Bunny and why I love it so much. I just don't think getting deep into it in this vlog, especially when I've only read half of it at this point, is a good idea. It has been really fun to be back and editing and playing with things. I don't know if I'll keep doing themed vlogs. I know I'm going to give myself a break and go easy on myself as far as timing on vlogs, and because if I just push myself too hard to read like a theme in 1 week, I'm very much a mood reader, and thankfully I was in the mood for all of these books, but I can feel myself burning out and wanting to read something maybe a little more lighthearted, maybe either a little more rooted in reality, or on the absolute opposite end, something that is clearly a fantasy and there isn't a question about anything about whether or not this is truly happening, but it is a fantastical world. And I might just be a little tired of unreliable narrators for now. It is one of my favorite types of narrative voice, but we all need breaks, we all need variety. And with that being said, I'll see you in my next video. I would love to talk more about books with lots of different people, and if you have read any unhinged women books lately, I would love to hear which ones you've liked, which ones you haven't, or just your general thoughts on this quote-unquote genre or trend. I think it is a topic that a lot of people have had great conversations on, and I don't think those conversations have been overdone yet. So I'd love to hear your opinions as well. I'll see you next time.